I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Steven, are you on the line and ready to go?
I am here.
All right. Right. Well, welcome everybody to QGive's webinar. My name is Todd Bayless. I'm president and co-founder of QGive. We're happy to have you here to talk a little bit today about leveraging your donor database for the best year-end ever. Before we get going too much, a quick housekeeping. Just for everyone's information, we are recording this webinar. We'll be happy to send you a copy after the webinar is complete. Feel free to ask us any kind of questions as we're going through this, and just use the chat box to the left, to the bottom left of your screen to ask any questions, and then we'll answer them during a Q&A piece at the end of the presentation. I'll be going back and forth with Steven on those and asking the questions from everybody. And also feel free to follow along on Twitter using the hashtag QWebinar. And as always, please make sure to follow us on Bloomerang, at Bloomerang, and at QGive too. So we're very happy today to welcome Steven Shattuck, from the Chief Engagement Officer of Bloomerang, to talk to us about leveraging your donor database for year-end giving. Bloomerang is a donor engagement and donor management software platform, and Steven can tell you a lot more about that at some point. But they are a great company, and their employees and staff are highly aligned with QGive on our both our customer-centric mission as well as kind of our values over here at QGive. So we're very excited to see Steven. He's also, or have Steven here. He's also the founder of LaunchCause, and if you haven't heard of LaunchCause, it's a startup nonprofit incubator in the Indianapolis area, basically helping build, educate, and really grow young nonprofits and help them be successful. So if you're there, go by and take a look. I'm sure that he'd love to show you around and give you a tour and talk about it. So with that being said, I'll hand it over to Steven and let him take it from here.
Cool. Thanks, Todd, and thanks to everyone at QGive for having me. I think this is your first webinar, so I'm really honored to be your first guest. This is a lot of fun. And,
yeah, absolutely.
And thanks to all of you for taking an hour or so out of your day. I know it's a busy time of year. We're in the year-end season now that it's October, so definitely appreciate you hanging out with us. Like Todd said, I work at Bloomerang. I somehow tricked Bloomerang into paying me to do webinars and blog posts and lots of other cool things. So I run the marketing department over here at Bloomerang. Like Todd said, we offer donor management software. So if you're interested in that, drop me a line after the presentation. But like Todd said, what I'm really most passionate about is LaunchCause. It's the nonprofit that I founded last year. So I'm really going to be kind of giving this presentation from the perspective of a fundraiser, not a vendor necessarily. I spent the last year doing a lot of fundraising for LaunchCause. I had about $100,000 construction bill to pay off, so definitely in a fundraising mode, and I'm actually getting ready to do my first year-end campaign for LaunchCause. I'm going to be taking a lot of the same medicine that I'm going to be talking about today. So just to kind of get things started, I wanted to first of all talk about year-end in terms of what is year-end, because I think that it's a term that is used to describe a pretty general and quite a large time of charitable giving, but year-end is very nuanced. There's a few specific days during the season that are important to remember, and we're not just going to treat year-end like it's one campaign that we drop in our direct mail vendor in late October. It lands around Thanksgiving, and that's all we do for year-end. So we're going to first of all look at a graph of a study that was done just a couple of years ago by Adobe, and they looked at volume of online donations in Q4, and I think we all can agree that Q4 is year-end for sure. But it's very nuanced. There's 3 specific days during the year-end season that I want to draw everyone's attention to because they're sometimes ignored for sure. We get our direct mail out the door and we kind of hold our breath that everything is going to happen good for year-end. But Giving Tuesday is obviously a big one in terms of your year-end campaigns. Christmas Eve is also kind of a sneaky good day for generating donations. And then New Year's Eve is actually the biggest day of giving all year. So not sleeping on that week between Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve is really important. Definitely do your sort of generic year-end appeal, but stay active through that December month, especially Christmas Eve and especially on New Year's Eve. And we're going to talk about some ways that you can kind of prepare your website and other things for specifically these 3 days, because they are kind of the biggest days in terms of year-end giving. So don't forget those 3 days. Circle them on your calendar. Giving Tuesday is that first Tuesday after Thanksgiving. We've got Black Friday and then Giving Tuesday, and then Christmas week and New Year's Eve week. You should stay very busy. Don't kick up your feet just yet. Don't close down the shop, certainly. And the least that you can do, and maybe one of the easiest things you can do, something we're going to spend a lot of time on talking about today, is kind of getting your website ready to handle all of that traffic. Because donors are procrastinators as well. They wait till the last possible minute to make that donation. And we want to make sure that our website is ready to receive those things, because they may just go right to your website without you prompting them in some cases. So we've got to make sure that we have those things in place so we can generate as many donations as we can, for sure. So let's get into my tips. I've got a few tips here, about 7 or 8 tips that I want to give to you to get ready for year-end, specifically as it changes to your database. I'm obviously a database guy, so we're going to be talking about the technology first. Before I get into that, I kind of want to take a step back and talk about donor retention for a second. I think it is more important to have a Q1 retention plan than it is to have a Q4 acquisition plan. A couple of reasons for that. If you are acquiring a Q4 gift, a year-end gift, that's great. Definitely do those things. But if you do not have a plan to retain those donors for the next year, you may be in a world of hurt, especially if they give less than it costs you to acquire that donor. You're going to have negative ROI off the bat from just that one gift. And then you don't want to spend all of 2017 marketing to them and sending them more direct mail and putting on events if they're never going to give again. And most donors do not give again after that first gift. There is a group called the Fundraising Effectiveness Project, FEP for short. And if FEP is not on your radar, check out their website. It's just afpfep.org. You can just Google the Fundraising Effectiveness Project. And they're a great organization. They study donor retention in the nonprofit sector. They've been studying donor retention since about 2006. And what they did in 2006 is they reached out to many of the leading donor management software providers, Bloomerang being one of them. Other names you might recognize, probably use yourself, eTapestry, Neon, Donor Perfect, Razor's Edge, a lot of those guys. And those companies, including Bloomerang, have been sending FEP our anonymous customer data ever since they've gotten going. And what they do is they crunch all those numbers and they release a report every year that sort of takes the temperature of donor retention in the sector. And the slide you're seeing now is the latest donor retention results from their annual report. This just came out this past December, and they found that donor retention is only 43%. The median donor retention rate in the sector is only 43%, which means we're losing about 57% of our donors, well over half of our donors. So we kind of have a leaky bucket problem in the nonprofit sector. And that's why I say it's really important to have your sort of donor communications and donor retention and stewardship plan in place now so that it's ready to go in Q1 and Q2 of next year. Because if you work really hard and you spend a lot of money generating some gifts this quarter for year end, but you don't retain those donors, you may end up with actually losing money even though they did end up donating to you. And one reason I focus on online donors specifically is that FEP found that for first-time donors, people who've only given one gift to your organization, only 29% of those donors are retained. And that number drops down to 21% for gifts under $100. And I am, this is a theory, this isn't necessarily backed up by science, but I would guess that for you folks listening today, majority of your online gifts, specifically on days like Giving Tuesday, Christmas Eve, and New Year's Eve, are probably under $100. So if you're generating first-time gifts for year-end online, those donors are at an extreme risk of lasting. We're losing about 80% of those donors. And that's why it's so important to have that retention plan in place even before you start thinking about how are we going to acquire new donors, get second gifts from our current donors during year-end. And when we think about having that sort of plan for retention, there are a couple of things that are pretty simple to focus on. And the best way to communicate those things to you is to share with you a study that was done by Roger Craver. Roger Craver he's an author. He wrote the book on donor retention, literally, which I'll share with you in a second here. He runs a great blog and a newsletter called The Agitator. If you Google Roger Craver, The Agitator, you'll find that. Great content there, really great discussion. But he released a book on donor retention last year. And in that book was a survey, and I want to share this survey with you. He basically wanted to find out, why are donors being retained? Donors who are loyal, they stick with an organization for 5 or more years. What did that nonprofit do to keep those donors around? So basically what he did is he reached out to about 250 nonprofits in the United States. And he asked those nonprofits to send their most loyal donors a quick survey, basically asking them, hey, why do you keep giving to us? What are we doing right? What do you like that we do? What keeps you giving? And the methodology for the survey was pretty fun. It was a list of 32 reasons why you might actually keep giving to the nonprofit. And he asked those loyal donors to rank those reasons by order of importance. And I want to share with you the top 7 reasons that were given by those loyal donors, because if you do these 7 things, you're going to retain donors. These 7 things can be kind of the North Star for your donor communication and stewardship plans, and specifically gift acknowledgement plans for all those year-end gifts that you're going to receive over the next few months. So here are the top 7 reasons why those donors said that they keep giving to an organization. Number 1 reason is that the donor perceives your organization is effective in trying to achieve its mission. So basically you do what you say you're going to do, and you have measurable outcomes, and you communicate those outcomes. So the number 1 reason why donors stay loyal, at least in this survey, is that the nonprofit is communicating positive outcomes. So that should be the cornerstone of your gift acknowledgement, your receiving, and all of that year-end stewardship that you're going to get out the door in January, February, and March. So how are donations going to be used? What are the success stories of previous donations that are similar to yours? Donors want to know that stuff. So knowing what you're going to communicate, at least having sort of a rough idea now, is really going to help you to retain those donors post year end. Number 2, donor knows what to expect from your organization with each interaction. So the donor communications that you send to people, not only do they kind of make sense, you're not sending an appeal to someone who just gave yesterday, but you're using their given communications channels. So there's another quick takeaway from you. As you're acknowledging these year-end gifts, make sure you're using the channels that they have said that they want to be used. So you have to ask them. You can ask them in their online donation form. You can ask them in BREs for direct mail, or you can send surveys. There's lots of good ways to get that information out of the donor. But always be using their preferred communication channel. Don't call a donor who has said, don't call me. Don't send direct mail to a donor who has said, I don't want to receive direct mail from you. I just want to be communicated through email. Make sure you're following those things. Number 3, and this is maybe the most critical in terms of year-end giving, donor receives a timely thank you. So donors want to be thanked for their gifts quickly, right? They don't want to have to wait a month or 2 months to get that letter in the mail or email or phone call thank you. So as you're thinking about when you're going to get the highest volume of gifts during year end, which is probably going to be Giving Tuesday and mid-December and New Year's Eve, make sure you know and have a plan for how quickly you're going to get those gift acknowledgments out the door. So even, by January 15th or January 30th, I think that's probably the latest I would go for these year-end gifts. Because this is the number 3 reason. Donors want that quick thank you. And donors may not consider that email receipt from their online donation to be a real thank you. So keep that in mind as well. 4, donor receives opportunity to make his or her views known. So an open line of communication. Having if the donor feels that they know someone's name at the organization, they have a phone number they can call anytime, email address, keep those lines of communication open for sure in Q1. And don't be afraid to initiate that conversation. Maybe you want to send donor surveys in January and February, especially to those new donors, those first-time donors who are given to you during that year-end season. Donor surveys are great. Even just a quick email, hey, thanks so much for your first gift. We really appreciate it. We'd love to learn more about why you gave, what's your connection to the cause, and what do you expect out of us in 2017. Sending those things and keeping that line of communication open is really going to be important to retain those donors. 5 is kind of similar to number 1. Donor is given the feeling that he or she is part of an important cause. So again, outcomes, sharing success stories, telling donors how their gifts are going to be used. Can't do enough of that. So keep those things in mind as you are acknowledging these year-end gifts. 6, donor feels that his or her involvement is appreciated. So, donor-centric thank yous, really laying it on thick. You're the hero. We can't thank you enough. We are making all these things possible. Lay on that donor love for sure, and don't be afraid to lay it on pretty thick, especially for these year-end gifts. And then 7, we've talked about this a couple times, donor receives information showing who is being helped, how the dollars are being spent, how their dollars are being used. What are the success stories? So maybe communicating in January or February, hey, this is a kid who benefited from our program, and now he's the first kid in his family to graduate from college. Or, here's an animal that was saved from euthanization thanks to your great gift. So communicating all those great success stories is really going to be helpful to you in retaining those donors. Because really retaining these donors is just as important, if not more important, than acquiring them during year end. So that's kind of my soapbox on retention, but now we're going to get into the really good stuff in terms of year-end giving. So again, most of these gifts that you're going to get going to come in late in the month of December, and because New Year's Eve is such a heavy giving date, I think it's pretty safe to assume that most of these gifts are going to be coming in through your website, because no one's going to be able to get a check out to you on December 31st in time for it to be cashed so that it can count on people's 2016 taxes. So it's really important to kind of make sure that your online donation sort of situation is optimized and sort of provides the highest level of stewardship to these donors. So we're going to look at pre-donation experience, but again, I want to focus on post-donation experience just because of all the things we talked about in terms of retention. One of the, or 3 of the key areas that really we want to look at here in terms of post-donation experience are those first things that the donor gets from you or sees from you immediately after making that donation. These things come into play whether they're giving on January 31st or, Giving Tuesday or any random day in October for sure. So what I would suggest to you is go to your organization's donation page online and make a donation to yourself. Give yourself $5, $1, whatever you need to do to make that a legitimate donation. And then look very closely at these 3 things. What does our confirmation page look like? That's the confirmation page that appears right after someone makes a donation. What does our email confirmation look like? That's the email that your donor database or your online giving platform sends out probably automatically right after an online gift. What does that email look like? Does that email communicate a lot of those 7 things that we saw from the survey? And then what's our formal acknowledgement going to be? Are we going to send a thank you letter? How fast does the thank you letter go out? How fast do I receive that thank you letter? And what does the content of it look like? These 3 things are really, really excellent places. Actually, they're kind of sneaky good places to communicate these 7 things to the donor right away, right? 2 of those things are completely automated. You just have to make a one-time change to these 2 things to make them way better in terms of stewardship than they were before. So I want to show you some examples of what I'm talking about in terms of these things. I'm going to show you some examples of pages and emails that I really love. This is a confirmation page from an organization here in Indianapolis where I'm talking to you from. The organization is called College Mentors for Kids. They do great work. I love their thank you page for a couple of reasons. One reason is there's a thank you. Some of these confirmation pages don't even say thank you. They just say, your gift was successfully transacted. Check your email for a receipt. Make sure these pages say thank you. Use the donor's name. If your donor database can do that, pull the name of the donor out and display it there. There's a nice thank you. Thank you for your generous gift. But then I love this last step. See what your dollars make possible. Maybe the best 6 words that you can use in terms of donor communication, because it's just stewardship, right? It does everything from that survey of 7 things. How dollars are being spent, making the donor feel like it's an important cause, all these great things. And then what College Mentors do is they have a nice little video right there on their confirmation page so the donor can interact with your website, even post-donation. But the video, again, continues those 7 things from that survey. So you take kind of a video tour of the facility. You see the mentors hanging out with the younger kids. So you see people receiving services from the organization. You see literally how the dollars are being spent. You see that it's an important cause. And you see that the organization is effective. I think this video it's maybe like a minute long, a couple minutes long. It's not too long at all. It's shot on an iPhone, so it's just someone walking around with their camera phone. Not a Hollywood production by any means, but it really gets the job done in terms of stewardship. Now, you don't have to have a video. It'd be great if you could shoot a quick video, but you can communicate these things through text, through photos, but definitely communicate them right there on your confirmation page. Your donor database may control this, your online giving platform, whatever it is, but look at your confirmation page and see what kind of things you can communicate. Like I said, it can be text. It doesn't have to be video. This is the confirmation page for WOLA. If you want to see it in real life, give them $5 or so. But there's some great things on this page. It's a nice thank you message. There's a lot of sort of impact statements. We're very grateful for your gift. This is what your dollars are going to be used towards. This is what previous dollars have been used towards. There's invitations to check out, annual reports, social media channels, and there is even a little bit of an About Us video down below. I like this page not only because it does a lot in terms of stewardship, but it gives the donor something to do after they make a donation, right? They're already on your website, so let's keep them engaged. Let's keep them on the website. Without a lot of these things, they're just going to close your website, and then you have to reacquire them next year and go through all that sort of donor acquisition steps again, which is very costly and time-consuming and not as much fun with stewardship, if I think. So look at these pages and see what kind of things you can add to your page to really just put a smile on your donor's face. I think that's kind of job number 1. Make them feel like $1 million for giving that donation, and that'll really help those retention rates for the year going forward. The second thing, the email confirmation. Too many of us are sending receipts. We don't want these to be receipts. We want them to be true gift acknowledgments. Even though it's email, and even though it automatically comes out of our donor database or QGIve or whatever we're using, spruce things up. You don't want it to look so cold and static. I mean, this one really looks like a true receipt. It says thank you, but there really isn't anything else here in terms of how dollars are going to be used and the impact of gifts and really making the donor feel like $1 million. You can't even reply this email. It's literally no reply at the vendor there. So remember, one of those 7 things was donors given the feeling that they can share feedback and make their opinion known. But you cannot reply to this email, so you literally cannot make your opinion known. So this email is also a really good opportunity to keep those lines of communication open for sure. I really like this email, which is also from College Mentors for Kids. They really do a good job of all these things. This does not look like a receipt. This automatically comes out of their donor database or their online giving platform, whatever they're using. it looks like a true gift acknowledgement. I mean, you could literally print this out and stuff it in an envelope, and it would be just as good as any letter you send. So thank you for investing. I love that investment word. You see smiling faces, the people who are receiving services. Your gift will help provide, so they're kind of setting the stage for how the gift will be used, because obviously they can't have spent the money within, the 2 nanoseconds that this gift was made. So there's lots of nice impacty type statements here. And then they're also previewing future communications. A tax letter with details of your gift will be sent to the address you provided next month. So previewing future communications, because donors want to know what to expect from you. So always be telling them, hey, this is what's coming next, especially if these emails do not include that tax information. You don't want that New Year's Eve donor worrying that, oh, I just made this donation on December 31st, but they didn't send me my tax information. Was this worth it? Did I give this to them for nothing? I want it to count towards 2016. But that sentence takes care of that doubt right away, because they're telling them that they're going to be sending them tax information. And then they shoot people over social media. So again, the email, like the confirmation page, can give the donor something to do. It doesn't just have to be something that's printed or archived and then forgot about. Keeping these things in mind with your letters, here's an example of a letter that's sent through the mail. Lots of donor-centric tones. You're a superhero. You did something special. Your gift means so much to us. There's lots of you words. There's very little we or I words. It's very donor-centric. And then, we made you a little thank you video. So again, it gives the donor something to do as well. So you can have that automatically generated email, but then you can send a second email. You could send this as a letter, most certainly, but making sure that all 3 of these things are very donor-centric and make the donor feel like, a hero, even though they made just a small last-minute donation. We still want to make them feel special. So think about your year-end acknowledgments, getting them out the door as fast as you can. I don't think that, a New Year's Eve gift necessarily has to be acknowledged on January 1st. You're probably going to be at the office. But get it out the door as quickly as you can. Always be telling them what comes next. Hey, we're going to send you our newsletter, or be on the lookout for our annual report, or maybe an event invitation. And use their communication preferences. You're kind of trying to decide, how are we going to acknowledge the gift formally? Ask them on the donation form, how do you want to be communicated to? If they give you a phone number and you did not require the phone number, I think that is an invitation for a phone call for sure. They may even be expecting that phone call, so definitely call them if they give you a phone number unsolicited. This is just some data for your purposes. This is kind of why I recommend phone calls and that 48-hour rule. Tom Ahern found that if you thank a gift within 48 hours, their retention rates will increase by four times, so quadruple essentially. And Roger Craver and Penelope Burke and some of their research, they found the power of phone calls. Roger Craver found that a phone call will increase retention by 30%, and a phone call from a board member will increase a donor's next gift size. So not just their retention rate, but the actual size of their gift, the size of the donation. So make sure you have a plan, not just for your year-end fundraising, but for your New Year gift acknowledgement. It's just as important. It's probably even more important, you could argue as well. One way you can do that is maybe downloading or creating a quick donor communications plan for yourself. This is something you can get over at Ignited Fundraising. That's Lori Jacobwitz's website. This is a free template that you can download. And it's just a quick Excel spreadsheet that kind of shows, hey, how are we going to acknowledge these gifts, who's going to acknowledge them, and in what format. So this is just kind of a sample plan. You can see that this organization is going to have a board member call new donors within 3 days. You're going to get a thank you letter out in the mail within a week. You've got your monthly newsletter. And then lots of other things continue throughout the year. So have kind of your year-long communications plan. If for nothing else, do it for first-year donors, those new donors who have only given one gift to your organization. You're going to get a lot of those during the year-end season. Make sure you do something special for those folks because we saw that they are only retained about 20% of the time, 20 to 29% of the time. So they are in the most danger of lapsing. So on to number 3, and this is a pretty quick and simple one specifically for your donor database. Before you get those year-end appeals out the door, make sure your database is clean, right? Make sure you've got accurate mailing addresses. If you're going to do a direct mail campaign this month or next month, make sure you've got up-to-date contact information for your donors, mail addresses, email addresses, phone number. There are some really affordable data services that you can invest in to get that clean data. I think it's a no-brainer to spend the money on these 3 things, or these 3 or 4 things for year-end. It's not too late. I know we're a week into October, but it's definitely not too late to do these things. If you've never done an NCOA, now's the time to do it. It's $300 or $400. There's 1,000 vendors in the United States you can get an NCOA from. Basically what it does is it takes your donor data information and compares it to the change of address database from the U.S. Postal Service, and it makes sure that if someone has moved, it will update your address if they can find that address for them. So, the savings in terms of direct mail costs for sending direct mail to accurate snail mail addresses is definitely going to make up the cost of the NCOA, and you may even generate additional donations because of it. And if you want the bulk mailing rate from the United States Postal Service, they actually require you to do an NCOA annually. So you may have to do that anyway. The cease suppression processing is probably my favorite out of the 4, which sounds really morbid, and that's kind of weird that I said that, but it honestly is. This will check a database of death records. So some of your donors that you're going to be appealing to in year-end, they may have passed away since the last time they made a gift or you solicited to them. And this will look at your donor database information and tell you if any of those current donors or people that you're mailing to have passed away. There's a couple of benefits of doing this. One, you are not sending mail to a surviving relative and assuming that they're still alive. That can really upset that surviving relative and kind of bring up a lot of bad feelings. But the second reason, and I think it's a little more compelling, that's an opportunity for stewardship. Let's say, John Q. Donor, he's given to your organization for years. You do this cease suppression process. You understand that that person has passed away. Hey, rather than soliciting their surviving family members, why don't you send them a great thank you letter? Hey, we're so sorry John passed away. He was a longtime supporter of our organization, and we just want to say thank you. Maybe that surviving spouse or family member is not even aware that they were giving. And that may actually be able to continue on that legacy that they will continue giving on John's behalf. Again, that's a few $100. All of these things are going to generate positive ROI for you in savings of direct mail and maybe even new potential donations that could come in. And I know a couple people are chatting in. We're definitely going to send you the slides and the recording. So don't worry about that. You'll be able to get all this information. And if you have to leave early, no problem. We'll get you the recording for sure. Next thing, number 4, segmenting your data. We don't want to send a year-end appeal to the same year-end appeal to everyone in your donor database. That's really what leads to poor response rates and poor donation rates. But I think that's really tempting. We have, our donor database, which is just this big bucket of names and email addresses and phone numbers and all this good stuff. We have our year-end appeal. It's our one appeal, and we're going to send that one appeal to everyone on our list. And I would definitely discourage that if it's not too late, because all the people in your database are very different. They have different frequencies of giving. They have different demographics. They've given different gift sizes. So why ask the same thing of all of those donors? These are very different people. We may want to make a different ask to people who gave last year, but they haven't given this year. That's a specific appeal. We want to make a specific appeal to people who have not given this year, they haven't given in a while, but maybe they gave to us sometime in the past 2 or more years. People who have given, only $25, maybe we want to appeal to them to become monthly donors. People who have given large gifts, $5,000, $10,000, don't send them an appeal that just asks for $50, right? You could be missing out on a lot of potential donations there. So resist the temptation to send one appeal. You should be sending multiple appeals to multiple segments of your donor database. At a bare minimum, this is a segment that I recommend, and what it requires you to do is first calculate your average gift amount. So maybe your average gift amount is $50, $100, $17, whatever it is. Figure out what that gift amount is, and then segment your donor database by people who have given above that amount or below that amount. And then slice it again by whether they are a first-time donor, they've only given to you once, or if they are a repeat donor, someone who has given multiple times. There's 4 appeals right there that you should be sending. We want to appeal something very specific to someone who has only given once, but they gave above average, versus someone who gives consistently. They've given every year, multiple times a year, but their gift amounts tend to be a little bit smaller. So at a minimum, you should be sending at least 4 appeals, in my opinion. And in those appeals, you can do very specific things. Maybe here on the repeat donor who's below average, maybe you're appealing for a monthly gift, right? They've given to you consistently. They give you $10 a year, $20 a year. Hey, John, thanks so much for the gift. How about $10 a month or $20 a month? So your asks and your content can be very sort of tailored to that specific donor or donor type. If you want to add a 5th and 6th segment, I would recommend major donors and existing monthly donors. So on existing monthly donors, maybe it's an upgrade. Hey, thanks so much for being a monthly donor in 2016. Would you consider upping your monthly donation in 2017? That's a great segmented year-end specific appeal for a specific type of donor. And then major donors, people who are giving you very large gifts, don't ask them for a small gift. That may actually make them angry. That may show them that you're not really kind of looking at their gift as a standalone thing. So 4 segments, maybe 6 if you can. But if you're run those reports in your donor database based on those sorts of donation types, donation frequency, donor types, and demographics. If you want, you can go even a little bit deeper and segment it by how that donor gave, so their channel. So you have your online appeals, you have your mail appeals, and maybe donors who have only given through events or attended events. We're going to do something special for those guys. But bottom line, if you're listening to this, don't just send one appeal to everyone in your donor database, because you're just missing out on so many opportunities for very specific types of asks and very specific outcomes from those people. 5, maybe my favorite of what we're going to talk about today, make sure your donation page is ready for that onslaught of online gifts that's going to happen on Giving Tuesday, Christmas Eve, and New Year's Eve. Your website has got to be ready. Make sure that it's working. Check out your donation page today. Check it out a couple times in November. Check it out a couple times in December. Make sure it's working, bare minimum. If something goes wrong and it's not working on Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve, that's going to be disastrous for you, because you're going to be getting a lot of gifts there. Make sure things are working, but also make sure that they're optimized for high gift amounts. If you're using PayPal and your current donor database has online giving, make that switch from PayPal if you've been putting that off. There are tons of surveys and data studies. I could go blue in the face talking about them that show that if you can have a donation page that is not PayPal, that lives right on your website, you're going to get way more donations. So you don't want to be sending people to PayPal. You want to be sending people to a branded giving page or an actual page on your website with a donation form. So nonprofit.org/donate. That's the best possible thing you can do. Most donor databases have an online giving component. If you have not enabled that or instituted that, make sure you do that before the end of October. Certainly, you want that donation form right there on the donation page, right on your website. But beyond that, there are some things you can do to optimize that existing page. You don't want to distract anyone from donating. There is a term that is used in psychology and web design. Maybe you've heard it. It's called the Toothpaste Trance. And the Toothpaste Trance gets its name from the grocery store aisle that has all that toothpaste. If you've ever gone grocery shopping, it's ridiculous how many types of toothpaste there are. It's overwhelming. There's too much choice, and no one really knows what to do. And so often our online donation pages are very similar. They give the donor too many different things to do. But we want that donation page to just zero in on just making that donation. This is a QGive page that I really love. Once you get to this donation page, you're basically locked into donating. There's really nothing else you can do. It's all about giving, what the impact of it is, and making it very, very easy for the donor to give. So look at your donation page. I would recommend, asking for the bare minimum information. Only ask for information that you're actually going to use. You need name, and you need email address, and you need credit card information, obviously. If you're not going to call donors, don't ask for a phone number, and certainly don't require it, because if someone doesn't want to give you their phone number, they're not going to donate. So don't even ask for it if you're not going to use it. Now, we've seen the power of phone calls, of course. I think that you should ask for it, but certainly make it non-required. Suggested gift amounts are a great idea. If you don't have those on your donation form, definitely ask for those. Suggest those donation amounts, $15, $50, $60. Anything you can do to take the guesswork out of the donor's mind is going to increase the potential that they actually make a gift. And I love what this organization does, Coburn Place here in Indianapolis. Not only do they suggest gift amounts, but they justify what those gifts do. So you don't have to wait until after the donation occurs to tell the donor how gifts are going to be used. So $15 provides this, $50 provides this, $100 provides this. And, nitpicky Steven would say, try to avoid really round numbers, numbers that end in zero. I love what this organization does. They really use weird gift amounts, $29, $52, $110. They look more real. They are literally tied to how that gift is either going to be used or some sort of little hook there. So think about spicing up those suggested gift amounts, tie it to an actual impact, and use weird gift amounts because they'll get the donor thinking about the true impact of their gift. Make sure you have a monthly gift option on those donation forms. Monthly gifts are super sticky for retention. Any type of social proof or security information is just going to make the donor feel a lot better about making their gift. So this is a secure donation. We have a high rating if you want to get to that. Make that donor feel very secure in the fact that they're making a gift. The donate button, maybe instead of using submit or donate, you again tie it to impact. So click this button to change a life. Click this button to feed the hungry. Have some fun with that, because the more you can do to kind of communicate impact, it's going to help those donors be retained. So other things to consider on your donation page, the layout. Are there warm colors, but not being distracting from that donation form? You want that form as high up on the page as possible. You don't want them to have to scroll or look around for it. Supporting text that, kind of nudges the donor along to make that donation. Hey, this is how your dollars are going to be used. This is what you can expect from us going forward. Make sure you have suggested gift amounts, and only request donor information that you're really going to use. You can always go back and get more information from them, but, veer towards the bare minimum, because there's lots of studies that suggest that the more donors have to fill out, it can reduce conversions on those pages. Fundraising, you don't have to do it alone. It doesn't just have to be you in the development department. Use your donor database to look for people who can help you. Who are people in your database that have given consistently for 5 or more years, people who have soft credits in your database, so they've brought other donors into the fold for you, people who volunteer a lot, people who have high engagement levels. If you're not measuring engagement in your donor database, you definitely want to do that. These are the people who can help you during your year-end campaign. They can spread the word for you. They can be ambassadors for you on social media, certainly, especially around Giving Tuesday. Look in your donor database. Spend the month of October identifying who are some people who can help us raise money. You don't have to do it alone. You don't have to just rely on that one direct mail campaign. So, use your database. It's not just a bucket of names. It can be a real tool for you to find the people who can help you raise more money. And then the last thing is, hey, you're going to get a lot of gifts, this November and this December. Make sure that you have a documented procedure on how you are going to enter those gifts. This will help you keep your data clean for 2017. And then you may not have to invest in much in data services and NCOAs and things like that. So have a sort of a documented plan for data entry for your donor database. If you don't have one of those, you can download one. I've got one for free that you can download. Just go to our resources page. But what I'm talking about here is things like, hey, are we going to spell out street, or are we going to use ST period? And I know this sounds really boring and not very exciting, but these things are important. Keeping your data clean is really going to be useful to you going forward. Are we going to use a 5-digit zip code, or are we going to use a 9-digit zip code? When we enter data, are we going to search that person's name first just so we can avoid duplicate entries? What are we going to do about households? How are we going to sort of maintain that? Who is going to enter data? Who is in charge of entering all these year-end checks and online donations if that's not integrated? Have a plan. Have a documented sort of plan for how these things are going to get entered in. Because so often what I've seen happen is in January, you've got all these gifts that need to be entered in, and it's very haphazard, and tons of people are in the database together, and they're all doing it a different way. And then when you go to do your spring appeal and your year-end appeal in 2017, that's really going to hurt you because this data is not very clean. It's not going to allow you to do effective appeals next year for sure. So just some things to wrap up. Have that plan for how you're going to retain your year-end donors. Very important. You don't want any negative ROI to start off the year, and you don't want to be generating a negative ROI as you go through 2017. Make sure you have a plan for how you're going to acknowledge all those year-end gifts. Set yourself a timeline. Hold yourself accountable. We are going to acknowledge all those December gifts by January 15th or January 31st. Who's going to send the letters? What are the letters going to look like? And we talked about appeal segmenting, but acknowledgments can be segmented just as easily. We don't want to send the same thank you letter to everyone, just in the same way we don't want to send the same appeal to everyone. So you should have 4 or more thank you letters of different types that go out. And probably the best thing I can recommend that you folks do today is go to your website and make a donation to yourself. And judge what that experience is like. What does your donation page and form look like? What happens after you make that donation? What does the confirmation page look like? What does the receipt look like? And how fast do you get a thank you letter from yourself? Test those things out. Make sure everything's working the way you want it to. I just saw some data that was released by Blackbaud today. They are forecasting a 3x increase in year-end online donations over 2015. So this is the direction things are moving, and I think a majority of your year-end gifts are going to be online, especially on Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve. So that's it from me. We've got some other great resources on our website. I've got a lot of ebooks that you can download. One specifically that you might want to check out is an ebook that specifically talked about how to retain your online donors. And I just saw a couple of questions in the chat asking about sample acknowledgement letters and sample acknowledgement emails. I've got all those things. Just go to the Bloomerang website and click resources. We have a whole template section that has some great templates for your thank you letters and your email acknowledgments, all the stuff I talked about. So you can see some examples there and really get a head start on these things. But check out this ebook. Shoot me an email if you don't get your question answered here in the next 10 minutes. If you'd like me to look at a thank you letter or ask any other questions or have me look at something you're going to use, I'd be more than happy to. I'd be more than happy to review any appeal plans you've got, or maybe even some of those appeal pieces you're going to be sending out. So I'm here for you. Definitely check out that ebook. I think that'll really come in handy with you in January and February of this coming year. So Todd, I think we've got some time for questions if you want to come back, and I know there's been a lot that have been asked, so I'm happy to answer as many as we can.
Yeah, absolutely. This is all fantastic information. It's always amazing to me that sometimes just some very simple things can have such a dramatic impact on conversion and on these different things. And it's always fascinating to me, and it's great to have a lot of those simple things kind of put into one place and kind of talk about it. So one of the questions that came up that I think that was kind of an interesting one is there a time of day on New Year's Eve that people are online making donations, and what does that look like? And I'd be curious to see what yours looks like, and then we certainly have some data on that as well.
So yeah, we have data from our own Bloomerang customers. In fact, we had our company meeting today, and out of people who use Bloomerang, a vast majority of them, it was consistent with this graph. The vast majority of them did receive their online donations. December is definitely our biggest month in terms of gift volume, but Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve were our top 2 days. They were actually even bigger than Giving Tuesday. A lot of people kind of get, in a tizzy about Giving Tuesday, but don't ignore those other 2 days. Don't ignore Giving Tuesday, certainly, but in terms of time of day, I haven't seen it get that deep into it. There is a really kind of cool report that is done by Network for Good. It's called their Digital Giving Index. I'm gonna shoot you guys a link in the chat box here. They talk more about all the things I did today in terms of time of day and things like that. So check that out. I just sent it in through the chat room. It's very consistent with this Adobe study. December is the number one month, and they actually found that 11% of giving occurred the last 3 days of the year. So December 29th, 30th, and 31st, that's 11% of annual giving happened on those 3 days. So be active on social media those 3 days. Don't be afraid to send out emails. Don't be afraid to send out email appeals those last 3 days of the year. But check out that link I just sent in the chat. I think there's some other cool data in here that I didn't touch on. Hour of the day, I haven't really seen anything get that much in the weeds. But I definitely wouldn't recommend sending out an email at 11:30 p.m. I think probably the ship has sailed by then. But maybe get something out the door early in the day on those days. And everyone's going to be different. You're going to have a different outcome than another nonprofit listening today. Everyone's different. So, test it this year and then see if you can make some changes for year-end 2017 for sure.
Absolutely. And just to give you a little bit of our experience, we typically see it kind of escalate. If we're talking on New Year's Eve day, it kind of escalates through about noon, and then really spikes from kind of noon to 8, and then continues to kind of level, I'd say come down a little bit, but still be very high from 8 to midnight as everyone's kind of getting their last minute stuff in and those sorts of things. So you're right on target with trying to start it early in the day and kind of and get it out there for people to respond to from a year-end appeal. So that makes
very cool.
That works. Another question that kind of back on the graph that you were showing is what is it, any color insight behind what is that mid-December peak? It's kind of before Christmas.
Yeah.
And if you look at that, there's kind of that before Christmas Eve, and kind of it almost looks like on the 15th to 19th kind of.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Kind of
I wonder. I don't know, and I don't like to guess and do a lot of theories, but my theory here is this may be the date before people kind of start going on vacation. Most people take those maybe last 2 weeks of the year off. So maybe that's part of it. I wonder if it's also a result of maybe people being worried that even if they make a gift on New Year's Eve, it's not going to be counted in the year. So that could be part of it as well. But yeah, that is kind of a really interesting spike. And I also think it's really weird how it plummets early in the month. That may be a side effect of Giving Tuesday fatigue. Giving Tuesday's been around for 4 or 5 years now, I believe. So Giving Tuesday may be cannibalizing that first week of December a bit. But yeah, I would maybe even circle December 15th or so on your calendars as maybe a date that you might want to send an email or maybe a social media update or something like that. Could be interesting.
Absolutely. And I think we have time for one last question, and I think it's an interesting one, talking about Twitter and how young people are sometimes a little less motivated to donate, but they typically communicate through Twitter and not email, and should they be gathering Twitter handles as part of that, as part of kind of their donor management and their engagement strategy?
Yeah, I love that question, Elaine. And one thing I meant to say, but I didn't when I was talking about donation forms, is I make a lot of donations just to kind of creep on people and study what they send me. But one thing that I'm seeing a lot more of is asking for Twitter handles right there with phone number, email address, and snail mail address. That's something I'm starting to see a lot more of. It's usually non-required, but if you just have it there, you may get some of those people, and that's just another way. That's another potential bucket of influencers. So that's kind of what I meant here. So if you are asking for that information, then you've got this little segment of people that is active on social media and Twitter specifically. And maybe you can kind of harness the power of those people and their followers to be influencers on your behalf. So, ask for Twitter handles on donation forms. That's something you might want to try. Put it up there for a few months, non-required, obviously, and see what you get. You may get more than you actually think you would. Ask for it on communication preference. If you ask for people's communication preference, email, phone number, snail mail, social media. Make social media an option. The more intelligence and information you can gather from your community, it's just going to help you segment your data. It's going to help you send out smarter appeals and more targeted appeals. If you don't want to ask for it on your donation page, that could be an element of a donor survey that you send out maybe a couple months later. Why did you give? What's your connection to the cause? How would you like to be communicated to? And make social media an option there as well. But I agree, Elaine. I think that I haven't seen a big sort of age demographic. I think that it's kind of a misnomer that only millennials are on social media. I think the fastest growing segment of Facebook is baby boomers and older, and I expect those people to move to Twitter just as they move to Facebook. That generation kind of chases the millennials. The millennials will flee a social network once they realize that the baby boomers have caught on. I wouldn't consider it more of an age segment, but just sort of a communications channel segment that could span 30-year-olds, 50-year-olds, and even 70-year-olds.
Awesome. Well, it's such fantastic information, Steven. Thank you for sharing. I think we're about to wrap up the webinar, but just a quick thing for those mutual clients or for those prospective clients of QGive or Bloomerang. QGive and Bloomerang, we're partnered together to make online fundraising easier with Bloomerang on the donor engagement and retention side, and QGive on the online giving side. So if you'd like any more information, feel free to reach out and contact us. The information is part of this webinar, and our contact information for QGive is available. QGive.com. Our Twitter feed is @QGive. If you want any help, if you're an existing QGive client, and you'd like help kind of working through some of these, feel free to reach out to someone on our customer experience team and ask to have them help you or help kind of find some of these different best practices and work through them on your giving form. We'd love to help you get prepared and get through the annual giving season. So otherwise, Steven, thank you so much. This is fantastic information, and we appreciate you coming in there and sharing the story. And so we definitely appreciate you, and we thank everybody for coming. Thank you for holding out through the little beeps. We'll work on that and get that fixed for the next time. But we appreciate everyone, and hope to talk to you all soon. So thank you, Steven.
Thanks everybody for listening in. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.